Hey everybody, it's time for Thirsty Thursday, the 10 minutes where we run down the things that caught our eye, the hits, the misses, the highs, the lows, the head shaking moments that we saw this week on the internet and on social media. Susan, you start off this week.
Right. So we're going to start looking at a little bit of what's happening around in the podcasting world, because that seems to be exploding on multiple levels. So this week on what we're going to call Podcast Watch. Sorry, Jeremy. Podcast Wars. What is it called?
we could call it Podcast Watch.
So we're gonna either do a Podcast Watch or a Podcast Wars. And in what the big names are doing, what was noticeable a couple of weeks ago, and it went a little bit under the headlines because there was a few other things that happened, but this one stood out for me. Will, you remember the Smartless podcast?
I love Smartless, with Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes, and every week they surprise each other by bringing on a surprise guest, and it's kind of fun.
Yes, I love everything about those three and that podcast. So that podcast was purchased by Amazon for $80 million at the end of June. And one of the things that stood out in that deal is that now the podcast will be released on Amazon Music a week before it's released on Apple or Spotify. And given that they have huge followings on Apple and Spotify, this is a bit of a statement from Amazon that this is exclusive content and it stays on their channels. And I think they've really entered the fray on a couple of levels. Obviously, they've hired a new head of podcasts or whatever, who's ex-Apple, so they were pretty serious. And then they're acquiring these content properties. And it was interesting because some people choose to, like you were talking about this, some people choose to get the stars and create from scratch like Spotify has done, but Amazon seems to be doing an acquisition path. So, for all creators out there, I think there's multiple levels of why you should be paying attention to sound medium, obviously. But that said, creating content and really looking at content properties as an opportunity for acquisition as opposed to only like business properties, that's really exciting to me.
I think it was a smart move to buy an already established podcast as opposed to, paying someone a lot of money to start up a new podcast. Even if they have an audience, they don't have a podcasting audience yet. So I think that was a very smart move by Amazon. Very cool. I wanted to talk about, of course, Jeff Bezos, the latest billionaire to fly into space in a rocket that made a lot of people were making jokes about the shape of the rocket blasting up into space. It reminded some people of the movie Spaceballs, where they parodied a similar type of spacecraft. An aside, but I'll come back to it. Jon Stewart has a new show coming out on Apple Plus. Interesting, I didn't know. Well, I do now know because the show released a parody promo for the show, with like some big stars like Jason Alexander and whoever else in it playing the space billionaires.
I'm going to ride a rocket into space.
It's all about their rockets looking like their you-know-whats.
And it's going to look just like my.
But coming back to Jeff Bezos, something interesting he did after getting back to the ground safely, he announced an award he was calling, the Courage and Civility Award for like people who are demonstrating courage and are unifiers, not dividers. He gave $100 million each to Van Jones, who is a political, social justice, CNN commentator, even activist, a lawyer. And then Chef Jose Andre, who's got a project about trying to end global hunger, gave $100 million each to them, saying, use it however you want. Give it to your charity of a choice. Use it to do something good in the world. I think this was to counter that narrative that why are we spending so much money on outer space travel? Why are these billionaires doing that when there's so much problem, trauma, issues going on here on planet Earth? So what do you think about all that?
I mean, it's funny. I love it when the meme makers go nuts with this kind of thing. And so I've been enjoying it. There was the Dr. Evil stuff as well because of the bald head. And so I was quite enjoying that. Like Bezos is trying to put some money into like, okay, here I did this. It's like a carbon offset points kind of thing.
But you're saying both things are important. Yes.
Yes.
Space travel, the future, exploration, developing new technologies, inspiring people, and also, yes, looking after the planet. So I think that was his counter, the $200 million prize giveaways.
Like I said before, I mean, it's their right to do what they want with their money and fly around in phallic rockets to strange stratospheres. That said, what you and I were talking about in this, great innovation comes from crazy billionaires. It's always come from crazy billionaires. And we were talking about that line that Henry Ford said, which is that if you asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, and we'd never have had cars. So, you've got these crazy people where in this moment, it feels like there's like almost anything else you could have done with your money other than that. And you chose this.
Let's move on to another fun topic, the Olympics. They are starting tomorrow. The opening ceremony is tomorrow, Friday the 23rd. So by the time the newsletter version of this goes out, they'll basically be ready to go. It's been a bit of a mess, as we know. Japan itself is against, the majority of Japanese are against the Olympics, not pro-Olympics. There's been internal scandals in the organizing body of the Tokyo Olympics. There was just a recent resignation. Aside from all of that, and athletes are already testing positive, some for COVID, this has the potential to be a super spreader event. Toyota announced they wouldn't be doing their broadcast advertising in Japan. So they're being sensitive and looking, so like it's a win, I guess, for them, because the Japanese people are like, yeah, Toyota, cool. You're not, capitalizing on something we don't want to do here. They are keeping their international advertising going. As we know, the Olympics now is all about money from broadcast rights, right? Like that's how you make your money. That's why it's being forced through. The IOC wants their money. Tokyo has to make their money back. And a lot of that comes from broadcast rights. That's tied to the advertising dollars. So there's tons of companies who bank on and have planned million dollar campaigns based around the Olympics. However, what's the cost losing out 100 million or being associated with an event that turns really, really bad? So I want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think, you have to just sort of like pull back in moments like this. It goes back to our stop, drop, and roll advice, right? Like if you don't know what to do, stop is probably a good place to start, right? Look at that. That's an oxymoron, right?
I know, great.
Stop is a good place to start. It's just, for me, I think the greater problem is like, how many times does this have to happen over and over and over again in different places before people will admit that this COVID thing's not over? Like, I know that, it's reasonable to get out there and do what you need to do, smaller groups, keep it safe. Like, we learned the rules, we followed them for a year and a half. And I feel like, this is when the bodies that create these events need to be taking decisions that are maybe going to make them unpopular, maybe make them lose money in the long run. But, a week ago, we talked about the Euro Cup in the UK and how that really led to lots of spikes in the Delta variant. And then now this. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being super judgy, but I'm like, somebody somewhere should know a little better.
Yeah, well, especially in Japan, where they weren't as vaccinated as we thought they would be, because they didn't really have a lot of cases to begin with. So they were slow on the vaccination, and now it's all, getting messy over there. I totally hear you, though. I wanted to fit in before we do have to end soon. Clubhouse, the end of FOMO. Yes. We were joking. Yeah. FOMO, no mo. Okay, go ahead.
FOMO, no mo. Yeah, it was one of the grandest examples of FOMO marketing of the new Roaring 20s, I think, when Clubhouse launched a year ago. They basically, you could only get in if you had an invite from someone. And in the beginning, they only gave people 2 invites per person or 1 invite per person. So it was not like, someone could get in and invite all their friends, right? So it took a while for that way of marketing, or it stayed in place for a while. But yesterday, Clubhouse announced that they no longer require invitations. They call it the beta is over, and so anyone can join. But we know, as being in the marketing bubble or circles, that I think the shine has worn off for many marketers, for sure. It's certainly, marketers tend to be a little bit ahead of the adoption curve. So perhaps, many other industries are adopting it, using it, and finding it good for them. But that said, I think this effort at taking the invitation off is probably their way of rejigging the thing. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the FOMO marketing, like I said, worked for them really well, but that sort of thing doesn't work in the long run, and good for them for changing it. That's the stories of the week, folks.
Yeah, there you go. Later, skater.
Later, skater.